Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Kataoka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney visited Kyiv as a special guest for Ukraine's Independence Day. Vowing unwavering support, U.S. President Donald Trump's envoy Keith Kellogg also joined these celebrations, with President Volodymyr Zelensky confirming his presence as Ukraine courts Washington's backing to end the war. Russia and Ukraine have exchanged 146 prisoners of war each, even as a Ukrainian drone strike damaged a transformer at the Kursk nuclear power plant, sparking a fire without casualties or radiation leaks. Meanwhile, a fire at Russia's Novoshanksk refinery hit by a Ukrainian drone on Thursday has been burning for 4 straight days. Israeli planes and tanks struck eastern and northern Gaza City overnight, leveling homes in Zaytun, Shijaya, and Jabalia as residents fled under heavy shelling. The assault comes as a global hunger monitor confirms famine in Gaza City, even as Israeli leaders vow to press ahead with a full takeover. Meanwhile, top U.S. envoy Thomas Barak has arrived in Israel and met Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to discuss Syria and Lebanon. Barak also held talks with Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer and Defense Minister Israel Katz, signaling deepening U.S.-Israel coordination on regional security. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has declared that Tehran will not be obedient to U.S. demands, vowing to stand strongly against pressure for direct negotiations, according to local state media. Khamenei said the issue with Washington is unsolvable. South Korea has told China that it wants to normalize strained ties, with envoy Park Byung-sung meeting Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Beijing and delivering a letter from President Lee Jae-myung to President Xi Jinping. The move comes as Lee travels to Washington to meet U.S. President Donald Trump, highlighting Seoul's balancing act. Israeli airstrikes have hit the Yemeni capital Sanaa, targeting areas near the presidential complex, missile bases, and oil facilities, according to Houthi-run media. These strikes came 2 days after Houthi militants fired a ballistic missile towards Israel. The Nigerian Air Force have rescued 76 kidnapped victims, including women and children, after a precision airstrike on a bandit stronghold in Katsina State. Though one child has died in this operation, the strike targeted a gang led by Bob Barrow, marks a potential breakthrough against criminal networks terrorizing northwest Nigeria. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that Kyiv is now using domestically produced long-range weapons without consulting the United States. He noted that while Ukraine previously sought approval for strikes on Russian targets, those days are long past. Zelensky also commented on relations with Hungary, suggesting future ties depend on Budapest's stance. Let's have a look at what the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said.
Нашу далекобійну зброю вітчизняного виробництва. І ми останнім часом, якщо чесно, не проговорюємо зі Сполученими Штатами Америки такі моменти. А колись це було, ви пам'ятаєте, було різні сигнали щодо наших ударів у відповідь після їх ударів по нашій енергетиці. Це було вже дуже давно. Сьогодні ми навіть про це не згадуємо. Тому для мене
Meanwhile, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney visiting Kyiv on Independence Day pledged ongoing support. He announced over $1 billion in new military aid, including drones and ammunition, and praised U.S. President Donald Trump's role in fostering peace. Carney also declared Ukraine's independence will be our victory. Canada will always stand with you. Here's what the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has said.
There's a reason that NATO recognizes member states' investments in Ukraine as defense, Ukraine's defense as critical investments in our collective defense as NATO members. Because if Russia's aggression goes unchallenged, it will not stop here.
This comes as Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov accused Ukraine of blocking peace talks, blaming President Zelensky for setting demands. He warned efforts to derail the Putin-Trump process that must be stopped. Let's listen into what Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said.
Ищут повод для того, чтобы переговоры не допустить, и хотят, чтобы это произошло не по их вине, не по вине Зеленского, который тоже артачится и какие-то условия выдвигает, требует немедленной встречи с Путиным, независимо ни от чего. Попытка нарушить тот процесс, который, в общем-то, был заложен президентами Путиным и Трампом, который дал очень неплохие результаты, и мы надеемся, что эти попытки будут сорваны.
Now for this discussion, we are joined by Raymond Vickery. He's a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce, joins us live from Washington. Thank you, Raymond, for joining us. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, how might President Zelensky's decision to use domestically produced long-range weapons without U.S. consultation affect the strategic dynamics between U.S. and Ukraine?
Well, thanks very much for having me. It's plain that to wage peace like you wage war, you have to have both strategy and you have to have partners for peace. The Trump administration has shown neither of those. There's no strategy other than a real estate kind of deal where he and Putin would get together and supposedly as great men, they would make a decision. That, of course, is not a strategy. It's simply a projection of the real estate approach of President Trump onto the international stage. And there is no real partnership for peace with NATO, with Ukraine. It's really about the aggrandizement of President Trump in his drive to have a Nobel Peace Prize and be recognized in his own view and in others as a great man. That having been said, what you see now with President Zelensky is he's gotten the message loud and clear, and that is that the United States, while he will try to keep them and keep us involved in providing weapons, the message is that Ukraine, President Zelensky, must rely on himself and Ukraine must rely on itself, along with partners for peace, which are the NATO members minus the United States. This is, of course, a very unfortunate development because peace is indivisible and the war, as you have indicated, Prime Minister Carney has said, affects the security of all of the North Atlantic. President Putin is intent upon putting together the old Russian Empire, which became the Soviet Union. And if he is not deterred here in this greatest of all transgressions of the UN Charter provisions against imperialism and invasion, he'll just simply go forward to try to reestablish the hegemony which the Soviet Union had over Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, Eastern Poland at least, and the other countries which were behind the Iron Curtain. So it's a very unfortunate development that President Zelensky feels he needs to go alone, but that's the message which I think any logical person would derive from what happened in Alaska and what happened here in Washington this past week.
Right, and since you've also mentioned Prime Minister Mark Carney, so what do you think, what does Canadian Prime Minister's presence and endorsement of President Trump's peace efforts, regardless of what happened in Russia, the Alaska summit, and suggests about shifting international alignment with the Ukraine war?
Well, of course, one has to welcome any move toward peace. And it has to be said that at least President Trump is not advocating more war. And the problem is, as I said, no strategy, no coalition to be able to go forward. So what Prime Minister Carney is doing is, one, trying to play to Trump's sense of ego and praise him for what he has done, while at the same time making it clear that Canada and other members of NATO are going forward in the really ironclad kind of commitment to the independence of Kyiv. And he's demonstrated this not only by his remarks, but by his presence. Unfortunately, we do not have an equivalent kind of approach from President Trump and the United States. One can hope that there will be a wider coalition of great democracies against this invasion, which took place on the 24th of February 2022, and that the principles enshrined in the UN Charter against non-aggression, non-invasion, non-imperialism will once again come to the fore. But it's going to be a very, very difficult process with this sort of going along, my way or the highway approach of President Trump. What we really fear, of course, those of us who have followed Ukraine, is that President Trump is simply going to wash his hands of this and say, well, it's none of my business, I tried, and it's the fault of somebody else. That's not statesmanship, that's not leadership, and one hopes that that attitude can be ameliorated, at least by the Prime Minister of Canada and others standing shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Raymond, for joining us and sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we stay on this topic now. Ukraine's military says Ukrainian forces hit a facility at Russia's U.S.T. Luga port. Ukrainian Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky has said today in his social media post that Kyiv's troops recaptured 3 villages in its Donetsk region that had fallen under Russian control. The troops successfully counterattacked and cleared the villages of Mikhailivka, Zelenigai, and Volodymyrivka from the enemy. Now, for this discussion, we go back to Raymond Vickery. He's a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce. Thank you, Raymond, for staying with us. Now, both Russia claims something else and Ukraine claims something else for the gains and attacks. What are we to follow? What are we to trust here? What do you think?
Well, I think that you have to take the fog of war into account. The reality is that this is, at the present time, somewhat at a stalemate. Sure, there's back and forth with this village and that village, but as far as there really being a breakthrough one way or the other, that just has not yet happened. It indicates that, really, to me, the Russian military invasion has not been a success, and that the supposed military advantage which Russia has in terms of manpower, in terms of the size of the country and the weaponry, really has not produced any kind of quick victory, which of course is what Putin had expected. That having been said, it seems to me that if there is a coalition for peace of the NATO countries, and if the United States were willing to stand toe-to-toe, that the Russians really do not have the ability simply to march in and take over. Of course, the wild card is the threat of nuclear action, and that's what has held back first the Biden administration and now others from really going toe-to-toe with the Russians. But it's at a stalemate, and the only way out is to have a strategy which has a coalition of partners for peace, and the United States needs to stay involved, and one can only hope that President Trump will not just tire of this
Yes.
and wash his hands of the whole affair.
Yes, Raymond, and also today was Ukraine's Independence Day. And now looking back at Ukraine and Russia's conflict, it's almost been 3 years. So how do you think, how has this Ukraine and Russia's conflict has reshaped the broader global security landscape?
Well, it certainly has reshaped it. It's the worst violation of the principles of the UN Charter in 80 years, since World War II. At the end of World War II, people realized that this approach of just having several great powers sit down and divide up the world is not the correct one. Unfortunately, what's the reshaping which is going on here is in accordance with what Putin, Xi from China, and now President Trump see as being able to have the old spheres of influence and power, if you will, almost 3 different empires. And that is a total reshaping from the multilateral approach, which kept the peace largely for over 80 years. So it's a reshaping, and it's one which is very harmful. And we need to be able to get back to the principles that are enshrined in the UN Charter, that one does not simply invade and take over territory, start killing and use violence to be able to achieve national ends.
Yes. Thank you very much, Raymond Vickery, for joining us and sharing your insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Please stay with us as we come back to you after breaking news. Now, at least 1 person has been killed and several others injured in Moscow after a gas cylinder exploded at the iconic Central Children's Store, widely known as Donetsk Mir. The toy shop is located near the Federal Security Service headquarters in Lubyanka Square. Authorities have evacuated the building, which also houses restaurants, shops, and a cinema. As per reports, the explosion was caused by a helium canister. Emergency services quickly responded, clearing the premises. The investigation into the cause of the explosion is still ongoing, with authorities working to determine the exact factors. Let's hear in from an employee of the Central Moscow toy store.
Я работала в магазине на первом этаже вместе с покупателем. Потом в один момент просто произошел сильный хлопок. Никто не понимал, что произошло. Несколько минут было просто смятение и непонимание у всех людей. Потом спустя какое-то время прибежал охранник и всех попросил выйти на улицу.
Сидела в офисе, ждала начала смены. Было где-то 11-12, ближе вот к 12 ровно. Был какой-то взрыв. Вот, ждала я, пока мне скажут, что делать. И потом просто заиграла тревога. Вот, но тревога была необычная, как всегда, с музыкой. Просто, внимание, в здании пожар, эвакуируйтесь, без музыки. Вот, и нас всех эвакуировали, уже время... Эвакуировали нас к 12, прошло почти 2 часа, до сих пор нас не завели.
Now we have a breaking news. Houthi media has said that Israeli strikes on Yemen's rebel-held capital, Sanaa, has killed at least 2 people. Iran-backed state media has also reported a preliminary toll of 2 dead and 5 wounded following the Israeli attack on an oil company facility in the city. Now for this guest, this discussion, we go to Raymond Vickery. He's a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce, joins us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you, Raymond, for staying with us. Now, what's your reaction and analysis towards this breaking news that has just come in?
Well, I think it shows that we're in a very, very dangerous period. You know, peace is indivisible. And when you start down the road of legitimizing violence as a way to settle international problems, it doesn't stop with one-off, and it spreads in what are seemingly very disparate ways, from Ukraine to Iran to Gaza. And then what happens when it spreads to Taiwan, China? And this is the way toward war. This was shown in the 20th century and is the great danger which we face now. And the only way, it seems to me, to get back to the path of peace and prosperity is for nations of goodwill, primarily those which adhere to human rights, which are enshrined in the UN Charter and in many constitutions of India, U.S., and other democracies, to put back together the kind of coalition which illegitimizes this imperialistic approach which we had gotten away from after World War II. Sure, there have been transgressions and there have been lapses, but we have not seen anything like we have right now in Ukraine, Gaza, Iran. And the problem is that the progress we've made, just take with Iran in terms of getting some way to settle the disputes without violence, has largely been abandoned for the old-time 19th century approach of imperialistic violence. So it's a very dangerous time, and the only way to go forward is to get a coalition for peace and have a strategy to try to tamp down this violence and get us back on the road to concentrating on peace and prosperity.
Yes, Raymond, I agree with you. Thank you very much for sharing that insight and sharing insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. That was Raymond Vickery. He's a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce, joined us live from Washington. Now we move on to Europe. The wildfire crisis in Spain is nearing its end, with authorities reporting significant progress in containing the blazes that have scorched nearly 500,000 hectares of land, claiming 4 lives. According to the authorities, the situation is improving, but slowly, stressing the need to remain vigilant. Let's hear what the Director of Civil Protection has said.
Y esto sería el resumen en términos generales del CECO del día de hoy. La situación va siendo favorable, pero lenta. Tenemos que ser optimistas, pero sin bajar la guardia y finalizar estos territorios. Las zonas más preocupantes son Fasgar, Anyares, Picos de Europa y Porto, zonas en general de alta montaña con difícil acceso y perímetros con rocosidades muy difíciles para el trabajo manual. Se valoró que si todo se desarrollase favorablemente, a priori, al menos hay una semana de trabajo por delante donde van a seguir.
Though many areas have seen a reduction in active fires, regions like Fasgar, Anilares, and Picos de Europa remain difficult to access due to rugged terrain. With at least a week of work expected to fully control the fires, Spanish firefighters, supported by teams from across the EU, are battling extreme conditions magnified by a recent heat wave. Now for this discussion, we are joined by Desmond Majeko-Dunmi. He's an environmentalist, joins us live from Lagos. Thank you, Desmond, for joining us. Good to see you. Now, what did these recent wildfires in Spain again reveal that what is happening in environment and the challenges posed by this climate change?
Yes, well, the statistic that stands out most prominently here is that this particular fire in Spain is the biggest fire they've ever had in record. That is, more land has been devastated by this particular fire than any other fire, apart from 2022 was the closest. I think that was about 306,000 square hectares. And now we've got this almost 500,000 gone. Unprecedented. But not surprising, because again, we have been told categorically by the massive majority of meteorological scientists that this is exactly what will happen. We're exacerbating the global warming and we're not stopping. And this is the troubling part, but it also gives one hope that this will wake humanity up from the reality that we can no longer continue the way we have been continuing for centuries and centuries, which have brought about all sorts of conflicts between ourselves. As we're talking today, as your last previous guest mentioned, these are troubling times in humanity because of the fighting and the conflict. And this is driven by avarice, it's driven by selfishness, it's driven by negative aspects of our personalities. But because we're now targeting it against nature, because of the technology we have, nature is hitting back. And she's going to be hitting back very hard if we continue with our desolation and destruction of various incredible sources. So we need to take a lesson from what's happening in Spain, because bigger fires will be coming and bigger floods will be coming if we don't change our attitudes and stop bringing this, what can only be classified as comic reaction from nature. Wake up, humanity, change your ways, and be far more caring people.
Yes, thank you very much, Desmond Majagodunmi, for joining us and sharing your insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, Vietnam is evacuating over 325,500 residents ahead of a typhoon Kajiki, which is expected to make landfall on the central coast on Monday. Authorities are moving people to schools and public buildings, while 7 coastal provinces have banned boats from leaving shore. Vietnam Airlines and Vietjet have cancelled multiple flights. China's southern city of Sanaa has closed businesses, tourist spots, and public transport, issuing its highest red typhoon alert. The storm, with winds reaching 166 kilometers per hour, is expected to strengthen further, bringing heavy rain to Hainan, Guangdong, and Guangxi. Soldiers are on standby to help residents, and officials warn against going outdoors. Extreme weather this year, including floods and droughts, has already caused major losses across the world, including China. Kajiki's strength is being compared to last year's typhoon Yagi, which killed about 300 people and caused billions in damage, prompting urgent preparations in both countries. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Desmond Majagodunmi. He's an environmentalist, joins us live from Lagos. Thank you, Desmond, for staying with us. Now, looking at this news again, what does Typhoon Kajiki reveal about the increasing intensity of extreme weather events in Asia, and what long-term environmental strategies should be prioritized to reduce future losses?
Very good question. Well, again, it just reveals some of the most basic realities of science, of physics. You know, if you have more heat, you have more energy. So you add more heat to the oceans, more heat to the atmosphere, you're going to get stronger winds blowing. You're going to get these kind of typhoons, and it is horrifying. I mean, I can't imagine in my worst nightmare what it must be like to have winds that are over 160 kilometers per hour, blattering against your house, against where you might be. And the most vulnerable, of course, are the children. The children. It's a horrifying situation. But it is going to get worse if we don't change our attitudes. Stop doing things that are adding more heat to the atmosphere. It's basic. It's as simple as 2 + 2. And what are we doing? We're pumping hundreds of millions of tons of these heat-trapping gases. And we've been telling ourselves for the last 10, 15 years, we must stop this, we must stop this. But you see, it's very profitable. And there's groups of people that are making tremendous amounts of money. Again, we are being told by nature, change your ways, because karma is very, very real. So that's it. Our hearts go out to those poor people, and we do commend the government for taking necessary measures to try to evacuate the most vulnerable areas. But the main thing is to understand that prevention is better than cure.
Yes, indeed, it's very important. All the points you've mentioned, Desmond, I agree with that. Thank you very much, as always, for joining us and sharing your insight. That was Desmond Majikodunmi. He's an environmentalist. This is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.